Our amazing committee assistant has emailed out the minutes for January 15th and January 20th. The chair would entertain a motion. Mr. Ranking Minority Member.
Mr. Chair, I move to accept the wonderful minutes that were created and submitted.
Is there a second?
Yes.
Second from Representative James. Is there any discussion on the excellent minutes? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes for January 15th and 20th signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The next order of business is request for bill introductions. I will remind the committee and the audience and anybody else watching at home that tomorrow or Thursday is the last day to introduce bills in this committee because the deadline for them to be introduced on the floor is on Monday and we're not meeting again before Monday. So if you have anything that you want to get in the pipeline before the session kicks into high gear, Thursday's the last day. Are there any bill introductions? Okay, seeing none, I have two bill introductions. The first one that I would like to introduce is RS 3059. Which is requiring the use of the systematic alien verification for entitlement system. The second one is RS 3145, which is a constitutional amendment to establish a state electoral college for governor's races. Is there any question on either of those bills? Is there any objection to those bills being introduced? Okay, hearing only slight grumbling, those bills will be introduced. All right, committee, we have a few minutes here before we kick off the hearings, and what I'd like to do is I would like to rework House Bill 2438, which was the online registration, certification of online registration sites. The chair would entertain a motion on this bill. Mr. Vice Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we rework Bill 2438 and approve it for passage.
Right, and a second from Representative Wilborn. Okay, is there any discussion on the bill? I will start that discussion with an amendment. So committee, you'll remember the last time we worked this bill, what we thought we had done as we had made it a crime for the person who establishes and operates the registration website that isn't certified rather than the person using the website. And we also thought we were making this not effective until the rules and regulations were promulgated, which was one of the major concerns from the opponents of the bill. However, apparently we didn't do that, and so that's what this amendment will do. I would move my amendment. Do I have a second? Second from Representative James. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Okay, Mr. Ranking Minority Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just so we're clear, it's the balloon at the back on the second page that corrects what we thought should have been in place the last time this went through. Is that correct?
Correct. So the first balloon makes it clear that the person committing a crime is the person who owns and operates the website, and the second balloon makes sure that it's not effective until after the regulations are promulgated.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Representative Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there any kind of funding suggested for this, for an educational program, so that people don't accidentally find themselves charged with a crime?
There is not.
Is there any plan for one?
No.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions on the amendment? Okay, seeing no more questions, I will close on my motion to amend. All those in favor of amending signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay? No. Okay, the ayes appear to have it. Representative Simmons would like her vote recorded, her no vote on amending. All right, as would Representative Mosley. And the ranking minority member and Representative Neighbor. I've been away from you for so long, I'm untrained now. All right, we are back on the bill. Is there any more discussion on the bill? Okay, seeing no discussion, Mr. Vice Chairman, would you like to renew your motion as amended?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move that House Elections moves forward House Bill 2438 as amended to the floor for passage.
All right, and you renew your second? Okay. All right, you've heard the motion. All those in favor of passing House Bill 2438 favorably for passage signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Representative Simmons and Representative Mosley and Representative Neighbor and the ranking minority member would like their vote recorded as no. All right. Thank you, committee, for helping me work through that. Our next order of business is a hearing on House Bill 2447, and I'd ask the reviser to tell us what that's all about.
Mike Heim with the Revisor Statutes Office. House Bill 2437 establishes, provides for a presidential preference primary beginning with a primary election in 2028 and then every 4 years thereafter. The actual presidential preference primary amendment is on Section 7. On page 5 of the bill. There are some other, what I would call primarily technical amendments. The second section of the bill amends the Mail Ballot Act to provide that a mail ballot election cannot be held on the same date as a presidential preference primary. And then there's some amendments in terms of special election to delete the requirement that it be the first Tuesday after the first Monday. So after the first Monday is deleted, so it just has to be the first Tuesday. There's several amendments like that. On page 5, there's a deletion of a provision in current law that says that you can't register to vote within 30 days of a presidential preference primary, so that's deleted. And I think that's the gist of the bill. There's some other technical amendments and so on.
All right, are there any questions for the reviser on the bill? Okay, and just to make sure, it doesn't require the parties to use the state's offer of a presidential preference primary. It just gives them the alternative.
It's my understanding. You've got Secretary of State's office.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you very much. All right, we're going to open proponent testimony. Our first conferee is Jenna Repass. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair Proctor, Vice Chair Wagner, Ranking Minority Member Haskins, and to all of you here on the Elections Committee. I am here today to testify in support of House Bill 2447, which provides for a presidential preference primary election in 2028 and every 4 years thereafter, while also moving the date to March. My name is Gina Repass. I am the proud chair of the Kansas Democratic Party, and before I say anything else, let me thank any veterans or active duty members of our military who are here in person who may be watching this. The opportunity to have a presidential preference primary and to have it occur earlier in the election calendar will positively affect all Kansans and every party by bolstering their ability to make sure that national political leaders with presidential aspirations pay attention and listen to the needs of Kansans. As a party chair, it is my honor to advocate for and uplift those whose voices are not heard, who work every day to make Kansas a better place and a safer place and a more prosperous place to live. And we are proud of the work that we do to support candidates up and down the ballot, to give Democrats the resources they need to make a positive difference in their community. This is what the Democratic Party of Kansas works towards every day. Now, what we are not is an election commissioner or the Secretary of State. Some of us wanted to be, but okay. The scope and resources of any of the political parties in Kansas, listen, we gotta laugh sometimes. Listen, back to this, we all love each other. The scope and the resources of any political party in Kansas do not meet the minimum standard to provide Kansans with an appropriate presidential preference primary election. And it is duplicitous and wasteful at best, and it is disenfranchising and confusing to voters at worst. A permanent state-run presidential primary held early in the national calendar promotes broad voter access, professional election administration, legal certainty in a way that no party-run primaries or caucuses can, and state administration ensures uniform accessibility, transparency, accountability, while avoiding the exclusion, operational instability, and risk inherent in ad hoc party-run processes. Codifying an early primary into statute provides long-term predictability for our voters. It helps our election officials and candidates. It strengthens public confidence in the process, and it secures the state's role as a meaningful participant in the presidential nominating system. By harmonizing our presidential preference primaries with the election infrastructure already in place for primary and general elections, we captured the advantages of having an earlier presidential preference primary in Kansas, and Kansans continue to deliver consistent elections for its voters. For these reasons, I am in favor of HB 2447, and I do urge you all to vote in favor as well. Thank you in time. Thank you for your time and your consideration and your great work on this committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I forgot to mention, you're good. I forgot to mention this before, but we've got a lot of conferees on both bills, so I'm going to ask everybody to keep it to 3 minutes, which you were well under, so I didn't have to say anything. But I'll ask all the conferees, keep your testimony to 3 minutes so we have time for questions. And I'm going to wait until the end of all the proponent, all the neutral, et cetera, before we do questions, just in the interest of time. The next conferee I'd like to call, I'm going to call a little bit out of order because he has to get off the line here. Do we have David Sofer on WebEx?
Yes,
welcome
I'm
to the
here.
committee, Mr. Sofer.
Thank you. Really appreciate it, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I apologize. I'm in Wisconsin today testifying on a separate bill from my day job, but took a few minutes to be here. So really appreciate the time. For those that know me, I've worked in Kansas, I've worked for governors on both sides of the aisle, but I'm here today representing the Jewish community. For us, this is a really big deal, because historically, we have had caucuses that have been held on Saturdays, which is the Sabbath for the Jewish community. For those that are not familiar, on the Sabbath, Jews cannot travel by car. They can't go to work. They can't do things that are not related to resting. So we can't use electricity. There's a lot of restrictions with respect to the Sabbath. So historically, we have not been able to go out and vote in presidential primaries that have been held on Saturdays. Last presidential primary, we were able to go out and vote. That was something that was very big for us. For the Jewish community, voting is a really big deal. We love to get out and vote, but we can't violate the Sabbath for doing so. This bill helps rectify that situation by creating a primary system that would allow people to vote. It's on a Tuesday. It wouldn't conflict with any holidays or any religious restrictions. And so, for that, it would be a really big game-changing moment for Kansas. It would increase turnout. It would increase the ability for the Jewish community to get out and vote. And it'd be a welcome change for many of us who value our right to vote. And it would also allow for absentee ballots and voting. So I think that's another really big piece. So we're all people of faith. I think everybody in this committee can appreciate that. We've got Republican chairwoman, the Democratic chairwoman. So it's not really a partisan issue. So as law-abiding Americans, we all want to be able to go out, get out and vote, show our support for who it is we want to be the presidential candidate. This bill properly sets that up and allows our community to be able to participate in that key civic responsibility that we all have, and we're grateful to it. So for that, we're in support of HB 2447 and would love to be able to get this bill out of committee and move it favorably for passage. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony, sir. Our next conferee is Ms. Denidre Herbert.
Chair and members of the committee, thanks for taking a few minutes to hear my testimony. You have my written testimony, hopefully, in front of you somewhere, so I won't spend too much time repeating everything, but I would like to direct you to one of my primary focuses, I almost forgot to tell you this, I'm the Kansas GOP chair, here on behalf of the Kansas Republican Party. We support this wholeheartedly because we think it is a good opportunity for Kansas, which I personally think is the best and most important state in the nation, to have a bigger voice in electing the leader of the free world. We deserve a voice, our people are smart, and we don't get one when we do it too late or when we do a caucus. Not as many people participate, not as many people pay attention. It's confusing. The caucuses are a little confusing for folks if they're not well-informed on party politics and the process. So this is a way to really expand who votes in these elections and give Kansas a bigger voice, greater national influence. And the increased voter participation and engagement is really important to us. I think as politicians, you guys all want well-educated folks. Folks are educated when it comes to presidential elections. They see it everywhere. They know it's happening. The predictability of doing it on Super Tuesday is huge because we all see the news and see there's last time there were 16 states who did presidential preference primaries on Super Tuesday, lumping us in with those. That's the biggest, most important day. When we've done it later, we get less turnout than we would on a big day when it's meaningful. And one quick difference between caucuses and the presidential preference primaries, in 2016, I believe, we had a caucus. And this is in former National Committeewoman Helen Van Etten supplied some testimony written, I believe the numbers are in her testimony. But the turnout for the caucus in 2016, which was huge, I think we were at 8 or 9 people running on the Republican side. And then fast forward 8 years later to 2022, with 2022, there were more people who voted after the nomination had already been secured. More Kansas Republicans voted in a presidential preferential primary, even when it was decided, than voted when there were still 8 candidates on the ballot because it was a caucus system. So we think it's really important. It also provides some predictability for voters, parties, and election officials. I will stand for questions. I think it's just really important that we all get a better say in who leads the free world.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next conferee is Ms. Linnell Griffith. Welcome to the committee, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Chairman Proctor, members of the committee. Thank you so much for this opportunity to give testimony. My name is Linnell Griffith, and currently I serve as the chairwoman for the Shawnee County Republican Party, and I'm definitely in support of a presidential preference primary. I appreciate the elections in Kansas, the election integrity, and this will only increase that election integrity as well as the turnout, as you've heard mentioned before. I've worked a couple caucuses. I've worked a couple regular elections under the leadership of the Shawnee County Election Office, and there is no contest about which can provide a more fair and secure election. The professionals with all the tools, with the great laws that we've passed for election integrity. So not only that, but as mentioned, the turnout is so much higher when it's an election as opposed to a caucus. And it's so much more accessible too. You have a caucus, maybe it's, I don't know, a handful of hours on a Saturday. Not all members of the faith community can make a Saturday. But also, my goodness, the line was wrapped around our building because we had one location in Shawnee County as opposed to various polling places when we have an election. So I am very much in support of this HB 2447, and I thank you for your good work on it.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next conferee is Mr. Matt Bangesser. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Haskins, for having this hearing today. Is this on? I just want to make sure. Okay, it is. Okay, very good. So this bill is House Bill 2447. It's a great bill that will give bipartisan opportunities to both Republicans and Democrats to participate in the presidential election process to its fullest extent. And so I would want to thank the committee last year for working House Bill 2022, which established a special election date to be in March every year. And that way we could piggyback off that. I think it's an exact quote from the conference committee from our ranking member and our chairman. So we do appreciate that work, allowing this process to be smooth, to allow this bill to be part of that special election process. And so I do want to emphasize having a presidential preference primary is good for the voters because they're familiar with the process. It'll be run under the same rules as our regular primary system, and it will demonstrate, as previous conferees have indicated, that even an uncontested Republican nomination in 2024 yielded 95,487 total participants when Donald Trump had already defeated Nikki Haley in the process, compared to 2016 when Ted Cruz, Trump, and Rubio and John Kasich were still in a hotly contested bid. In 2016, only 78,978 voters participated in the process. So the voters crave predictability. They crave systems they're familiar with and can trust. And the elections run by our state and through our county election offices and county clerks are where the voters have their faith in the election process. And so the access to voting will be much better for the voters. And having it on Super Tuesday, right after the 4 early states of Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina will be next on the list. The voters will have the most opportunity to meet the candidates and understand the candidates before the process concludes. If we go later in March, you're probably looking at an election system that's already concluded, like we saw in 2024. The Republicans and Democrats under this system would be using a proportional system, so everyone's vote would count. And so I think that would be good. Everyone could go to the ballot box confident that their delegate allocation formula would produce some representation at the Republican and Democratic national committees, that their votes will translate into delegates. And so I think that will be a very meaningful thing for the voters who are participating in the process. I also want to emphasize, having participated in the caucus process prior, the caucus process in Johnson County in particular, the largest geographical county in the state, will be quite tedious. We had 4 voting locations in Johnson County in 2016. The lines were wrapped around the building, and I waited for 2 hours to vote in the presidential caucus that year for my preferred candidate. And so the primary process, if we were to adopt it permanently, would allow voters the flexibility to pick an early voting date, to vote by mail, or to utilize an election day polling location, like they would in any traditional primary for any other office. And so the same rules would be utilized, and so that would be very helpful for the voters so they're familiar with what is going on. Now, I do want to point out a potential amendment that could be utilized, is there is a typo on page 15, line 38. It said 10 days. That's for the abstracts to be submitted. My understanding from conversations with the Shawnee County Election Office, that should have been 15 days. That way it's 2 days after the canvass. So if that amendment could be processed, it would strengthen the bill and give them confidence in that. And so I have no further comments. So if there are questions, I will take those at the appropriate time. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony today.
All right, thank you to all the conferees. Is there anybody else wishing to speak as a proponent on this bill? Okay, seeing none. Committee, is there any questions for any of the proponents? Mr. Ranking Minority Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And because I don't get the opportunity very much, I would like to ask questions to Chair Repass, please. It won't be who's your favorite. That's fine. Because we all know, right?
I have 3 children. I have no favorites. All equally, just differently.
All right, so here, in all seriousness, thank you for your testimony. Thank you for what you do for Kansas and our party. But I want to, this one question keeps hitting me, and it's the Secretary of State estimates, the fiscal note, it's $5 million that will be utilized for training. And I understand the benefits of a primary, a presidential primary. I understand the access and the voter engagement and all that. I just need a justification in light of the fact that we aren't fully funding special education, that this is the best way of spending $5 million of the taxpayers' dollars. Can you answer that and tell us what are we going to get in return?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question. I think it is very important. I do want to make sure that we understand that fully funding special education is wildly important, and I think we all agree that our children are our most valuable resource. I would separate these 2 things, because what we have right now, as everyone's testified to, is caucuses is different disenfranchisement for voters. And that's what we all want, because ultimately, whether we're talking about presidential primaries or regular voting sessions, that's how we get to the point where we can appropriate money to fund everything else. It all begins and ends in that ballot box. And the vote and the voice of our Kansan citizens is required for us to do what's right by them. So I would say this, in terms of where we spend money, it is in the point of democracy, making sure that every voice in this great state and our country is heard. And for me, there is no greater foundation to build upon which we will then do other things. So for me, I see a point of differentiation.
Thank you very much.
So since you're up there, I'm going to take chair's privilege here. It's not a hard question. Which method, caucus or presidential primary, do you think would better accommodate our disabled Kansans?
Oh, absolutely 100% a primary. And if you've never participated in a caucus, the idea that people would be able to take 4, 5, or 6 hours out of a day, if you don't have kids in sports or activities, if you are not working on that day, or if you've worked all week and you finally get to sit on your couch. But in order to make sure our voting polling places, our elections are wonderful here in Kansas. And I say that standing here as a Democrat. And we accommodate people and their ability to get into that voting booth. And that is our #1 priority as Kansans. I'm not going to tell your job as legislators. I'm saying just as American citizens in Kansas, that's our #1 job. And we do provide for that so much better. And quite frankly, as the state party chair, for us to try to accommodate all of those needs, we are woefully inadequate. And you will never hear someone like me tell you what my inadequacies are. But I will be honest with you, that is an undue duress on the state parties, and we do not always meet those needs. Whereas if we do a presidential primary, we do.
Are there any other questions for any of the proponents? Representative Brunk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt,
Thank you so much.
you said that you had a friendly amendment, and I was trying to write that down and look for it online.
Yes.
And I didn't catch it. Would you mind repeating that?
Absolutely, Representative. Thank you for the opportunity. So be on page 15, line 38, changing the number 10 to 15 would accommodate that. The Shawnee County Election Office pointed it out to me that the abstract should be due before the canvass if this were to pass as written. So adjusting that, they said, would be appreciated.
So we may have different copies of the bill, but there isn't a page 15 in our version. So if you don't mind talking to Revisor Heim and making sure that he knows.
Page 5, sorry.
Oh, page 5, I apologize. Okay. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for any of the proponents? Okay, seeing no questions, we'll move on to neutral testimony. And my first conferee and only oral conferee I have listed is Mr. Clay Barker. Welcome back to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Clay Barker, General Counsel for the Kansas Secretary of State. The Secretary, like on many of these bills, is neutral. You all can understand the benefits and costs of this bill and the policy arguments behind it. So our points are, first, all our mechanical concerns with the original presidential primary bill from a few years ago have been addressed, including this 10-day issue that Mr. Bingisser brought up. Second, a point that several of the counties asked us is one of the statutes in the PPP that is not in the bill addresses reimbursing counties with state funds for their direct costs in running the PPP. And a lot of the counties remember back in 1992 when they ran the PPP and then the legislature refused to appropriate money to reimburse them. And they asked if there was a way to strengthen that statute to require an appropriation, although I defer to the revisor whether one legislature can force a future legislature to appropriate money. And the Attorney General wrote 2 opinions on that, saying you can't sue to force a legislature to spend money. Briefly, the nature of a PPP. Now, I was the state party executive director for 8 years, and I ran the Republican one in 2012 and 2016. And the reason the state pays for this election, not the counties, is because the votes, you're not picking a winner. You're not picking a candidate like the August primary. You're telling the party who they should allocate their national convention delegates to vote for at the national convention. And the parties have formulas and rules to take those votes and turn them into allocated delegates. In 2012, there were about 26,000 Republican votes. I think the 105 counties handled that fine. 2016, as you've heard, it jumped up to 79,000 because it was a very contested race. I would say 90 counties handled that fine. A lot of electioneering, parties, cookies, bands, everyone's happy. 10 were stressed, 5 were overwhelmed, and that's the bigger counties. They could not handle the flood of voters, and it greatly exceeded what any of the candidates predicted would turn out. 2020, we didn't have any primaries, and in 2024, we ran a state-run primary with only 2 candidates. Everyone knew who would win. I mean, there were more than 2 on the ballot, 1 on each party's ballot, 95,000. I think the lessons there are when you have a lot of candidates, which we can expect in 2028, you're going to have a huge surge of turnout. And this does give the parties flexibility to not use the PPP if they want to do something different or they only got 1 candidate. But remember, they have to decide by December 1, which means you have December, January, February before the PPP occurs. A lot can happen in there, but I think the flexibility helped save costs for the state. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll take questions at the appropriate time, or anyone asks to know what it's like to run one of these.
Okay, so I'll ask you to stay there because you're the only confer I have listed, but is there anybody else wishing to speak as neutral on this bill before I open questions? Okay, seeing none. My one question, the ranking minority member raised the very good question about cost. How much did we think the 2024 presidential preference primary was going to cost, and how much did it end up costing the state?
Chair, we predicted, I believe, 5 million, which is where we got this number from again, and it ended up, I want to say 4.5, somewhere in there. And that's because when the bill was passed, both parties thought there'd be a lot of candidates running. It ended up being Biden and Trump. And so the turnout was a lot less, which lowered the costs.
All right, are there any other questions? Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with this $5 million bill, is that 2.5 per party if they both decide to have it? Or how's that spread out?
Each county has to certify to the Secretary of State the direct costs of running just the presidential preference primary. And there's a regulation that explains the difference between a direct and an indirect cost. So Mr. Caskey will go through each one and line off things like, no, we're not going to pay for your pizza party for the staff, things like that. And then we submit that to the state, and the state reimburses the county treasurer for the amount. So it doesn't go to the parties, it goes back to the county and the primary.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Ranking Minority Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony. And I understand that, you know, the 2 elephants in the room, well, the elephant and the donkey in the room, the Republican and Democratic Party are obviously the heart of this. But if we are impartial and we are going to provide funds for presidential primary, preference primaries, what consideration should we give to the libertarians or anyone else that might have something nationally or the opportunity? Because it seems like we're just specifically giving funds to just 2 ideology. And again, they're the major ones, but it seems like we should be allowing any taxpayer the opportunity to participate in a primary, no matter what their ideology is.
Mr. Ranking Minority Member, so Kansas has a law that requires a primary if a party gets more than 5% vote in a statewide election. There's only 2 parties that qualify for that. All other parties have to pick candidates, and this is the regular primary, by a party convention, and they just give the Secretary of State the name of their candidates. And that concept was passed on to the presidential preference primary, where only parties that qualify for an August primary election can avail the PPP process. The other parties just have their small conventions and decide who their delegates are going to vote for.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you very much.
Representative Mosley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned that the $5 million budget was based off of a bunch of potential candidates running, and then we got to 2024, and it was just a repeat. And it still costs $4.5 million. Is there a risk that this actually is going to be way more expensive based off of a much lower turnout with a predictable outcome? And then what happens when, where do those funds come from if it is significantly more expensive?
Representative, it's our belief that $5 million is adequate to run elections in all 105 counties. And there's only one race. There isn't multiple races on the ballot. It's easier to count, faster, probably less staff. It's possible that it could go over. I don't see being a large cost overrun if it goes a little bit over, because that's just the basic amount it takes to run an election. And if it does go a little bit over, the legislature would decide either to appropriate money or not.
Are there any other questions for the neutral conferees? All right, thank you very much. I have no opponents listed to speak. Is there anybody wishing to speak as an opponent? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close opponent testimony and close the hearing on House Bill 2447. Our other order of business today, committee, is a hearing on House Bill 2493, and I'm going to ask the reviser to give us a rundown on that bill.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this bill deals with advanced voting ballots in the envelope statement, what has to be on this envelope if you are transmitting a ballot for someone. And the first thing it does is it requires, and this is current law, a sworn statement from the person transmitting or delivering that the person is or has not, and this new language is a qualified elector. So they have to be a qualified elector in order to carry it. And they haven't, current law, no due influence. They can't transmit more than 10 advance ballots. And the bill, the peanut of the bill, besides the qualified elector provision, is that the person transferring or transmitting the ballot, they have to put their driver's license or non-driver's license identification number on the envelope. That's it.
Right, are there any questions for the reviser on the contents of the bill? Okay, Mr. Vice Chairman.
No, Mr. Heim, just for point of clarification, so currently the person transmitting or delivering a ballot has to do what? Do they have to sign it? They have to do anything currently?
Submits a written statement accompanying the ballot at the time of ballot delivery. This is subsection A. Any written statement shall be transferred and signed by both the voter and the person transmitting, and shall be delivered only by that person. The statement on the form prescribed by the Secretary shall contain, number one, a sworn statement affirming they have not been unduly influencing the person and they are not transmitting more than 10. And this bill adds a new provision that they have to list their driver's license or non-driver's license identification number on it. They also, a sworn statement affirming the voter has authorized the person to transmit and so on, and the person has not been under undue influence and so forth. So anyway.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Representative Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mike, as always. So let's say a paraplegic voter's assigned care worker is a permanent resident, but not a U.S. citizen. How would the legislation guide that situation?
The qualified elector provision requires citizenship. So in order to be a qualified elector, the Constitution requires you be 18 years of age, and live in the area that you are voting for and so on. So, yes.
Do you know if that would perhaps negatively affect a disabled person's right to vote? If they're a permanent caretaker?
That's a question for our conferees.
There are people that will address that issue.
Okay, I have more. Okay, so what about a voter? Can they ask their friend who does not have a Kansas driver's license to walk their ballot to the mailbox? Does it address that at all?
No, it doesn't. They either have to have a non-identification card, which you can get if you don't have a driver's license, or a driver's license number.
Okay, thank you.
All right, are there any other questions on the contents of the bill for the reviser? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Heim. I don't have any proponents listed to testify on the bill. Is there anybody wishing to speak as a proponent on the bill? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move to neutral testimony. Our first conferee is Mr. Clay Barker. Welcome back to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Clay Barker, General Counsel for the Kansas Secretary of State. Our position on this is neutral. We think we understand what the legislature is doing, and I'll give you some very quick policy background that I believe. Back in 2010, I was in the room when then Governor candidate Brownback and Senator Roberts told the Republican Party they needed to get in gear with getting more advanced ballots in, get more people to ask for them, and once they get them, turn them in. Because statistics showed that about 60 to 70% of voters will turn them in on their own, but if you start doing advanced ballot chase, you can kick that up above 90%, and that could make the difference in a close election. And both parties started ramping up the race to use more and more aggressive get-out-the-vote tactics to get people to turn their mail ballots in. I believe that this statute, 2524-7, or the statute was passed in 2021, was an attempt to clamp down on this overly aggressive get out the vote by both parties and third-party groups. And they looked at two options. One was to require the carrier of the ballot to be either a close family member, caregiver, or guardian, or the option they chose was to limit the number of ballots a carrier could take, which they decided on 10. Originally it was going to be 5, and it went up. The issue that has come up, and which I believe this bill is trying to address, is how do you enforce that 10-person limit? How do you know that someone's only carried 10? And that's where the driver's license portion comes in. We had two concerns with this bill. First, it requires only a qualified voter to carry the bill. And we assume that's there to clamp down on sort of out-of-state operatives coming into the state and using overly aggressive tactics. This presents that we see two problems. One is a practical problem of out-of-state voters who use mail may not be able to find a Kansas voter to help them carry their ballot if they need that. And second, it might impinge on high school students helping out who aren't 18 yet and therefore are not qualified voters. The second and more important one is the legal issue. The Americans with Disability Act, the Voting Rights Act, allows a disabled person to choose any other person to carry their ballot. And the federal courts, Arkansas lost a case on this. They say any person means any person, and no state limit can affect that, which would make it more difficult for the state to know if somebody who was not a qualified voter carried the ballot for a disabled person. And disability under federal law is a pretty wide concept. The second piece about the driver's license being on a written statement is we'll work with the counties and find the most cost-effective options for handling that. There's several, Privacy Flap and some other options, but I believe we can get through that. But it's the legal issues that concerned us about enforcing this bill. And with Mr. Chair, I'll stand for any questions at the appropriate time.
All right, we'll go ahead and get Mr. Pifo up here, and then we'll do questions for the neutral conferees all at once. The next conferee is Mr. Rick Pifo. Welcome to the committee.
My name is Rick Pifo. I'm the chair of the Elections Committee for the Kansas County Clerks and Election Officials Association. We're testifying neutral on this, but we do have a few concerns. A few of them Mr. Barker already mentioned, such as the being a qualified elector. It's pretty specific that you don't necessarily have to be a registered voter. You just have to be able to be a registered voter, citizen over 18. And we have a couple issues with, I know it doesn't say it specifically that this language is on the envelope, but that's currently where the statement is. So we can clearly see when it comes in, even without opening it and looking at the ballot, we can clearly see that the voter signed it, third party signed it, whatever. So yeah, we could put it on another form, but currently it's on the envelope and there's not very much real estate on that envelope. It's pretty packed and a lot of us have existing quantities. These can all be worked out. We've done it before when you added the 10 ballot rule. We adjusted the envelope. And the privacy issue of putting personally identifiable information that's potentially out there exposed to the mailman or whoever's handling these ballots. The real question comes with enforcement. What are we supposed to do with this information? Are we supposed to verify the qualified elector eligibility and using the driver's license number of each of these voters and then report it accordingly to law enforcement? Or, like I said, what is the expectation of us? Or we just collect the information and it's evidence for future prosecution? I think I've got a few other issues listed in my testimony. One that is a little concerning is the fact that this bill would take effect this year, which then would be effective for the August primary and the November general. And we potentially would have to come up with new forms, new ways to process. So we do have a little concern with the quick implementation. With that, I think I'm done, and I'll stand for questions.
All right, thank you, sir. Are there any questions for either of the conferees? Representative Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Rick. I always appreciate hearing your perspective and the association's perspective. The fiscal note says that HB 2493 would increase counties' expenditures since the counties would need to revise the ballot envelope to add space for a person's identification number and verify the number. Can you talk about what that might cost counties and where you would get the money to pay for that?
It would come out of the county budget. Currently, I was out of envelopes. So I ordered for multiple election cycles. I have a pretty good inventory of ballots now. I could put a sticker over that area or whatever, but those are not just a form you print on your copier. They're envelopes. So we have to order those from a printer, so we order them in quantities. And just, I do have some samples, but this is the voting side of our ballot, of our envelope. We do it this size because it's letter size. It could be letter rate postage. But there are some, and this one is from Seward County. Seward County happens to be a Spanish language county. So they have to have every question in both languages. They use a 9 1/4 by 14.5 envelope. But there's been discussions about, with this personally identifiable information on there, we may all have to revise, and maybe I can't use this anymore, because now a driver's license number is going to be exposed to anybody that would handle this ballot. So we would need to look into how we're going to protect the privacy. And maybe it's a form that goes inside, but then sometimes these ballots, if they were challenged, may not ever be open. So we wouldn't know if there was a person actually committed a crime because the form is on the inside of the envelope.
That's very helpful, thank you. It sounds a little bit like this may quite literally be the definition of an unfunded mandate, which
potentially.
I hate to put you on the spot, Rick, but I'm going to do it. And Clay, I have a question.
Before we bring up Mr. Barker, is there any other questions for Mr. Pifo? I have questions for Mr. Pifo. So Representative Mosley, did you have a question for Mr. Pifo?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. During election season, that's a very busy time for you all. Like that's like your playoffs, like your March Madness, correct?
Correct.
Do you have the additional time to be potentially hand jamming driver's license numbers for individuals into a spreadsheet? Like how much additional time do you have during the election season to potentially be having to cipher someone's font, their individual font? Like, do you have a lot of time during election season for that?
Not a lot of additional time, no, without adding more staff.
Interesting. I wonder why there was no proponents. Thank you.
Questions about how do you verify that they're a qualified voter? If they have Kansas driver's license, we can compare against that. But if they're just a qualified voter and have a Missouri license, whatever, we have no way to compare.
And I have one other question. Yes, so if you found someone turned in their 11th ballot, does that mean based off of this legislation, you have to potentially not count that ballot? Or what would you have to do with that?
That was another question I meant to bring up, was what happens to the ballot? Because the voter hasn't actually committed a crime by not providing the driver's license or by somebody delivering more than 10 ballots. The voter has not committed a crime. So it has been that we count the ballots, but potentially the person committing the crime can be prosecuted.
Interesting. Thank you.
And Mr. Ranking Minority Member, you have a question for Mr. Pifo?
I did. Thank you very much for your testimony and the information. And I'm pretty public about the fact that if we don't have, if we're not able to hear any proponent testimony, that we should probably pause the hearing on a bill. Kansans deserve a thorough information on both sides of this. But I was wondering, could you maybe help me, being neutral, what is the problem we're trying to solve with this bill? I mean, I can't, other than we're putting more burden on the voter, suppressing the vote. I'm just curious. Help me out as a neutral, because you're not taking a side either way.
It's a good question. I would have to assume it has to be with enhancing security.
So, Mr. Hyfo, right now, is there a mechanism for enforcing the 10 ballot limit that's already in statute that was passed by over 2/3 of both houses?
Not really, it hasn't really been mandated that we are actively enforcing that. We collect the evidence. So if there was a claim made to the county attorney or whatever, they could come to us and get the evidence and go through it all and find that there's a person that did more than 10 or whatever, but not actively.
Would it be easier to identify a driver's license number that is used more than 10 times than to decipher somebody's signature that is used more than 10 times?
Not necessarily.
You don't think it'd be easier to read the driver's license than tell that?
May or may not. A lot of handwriting is not very good, and you can't really make out.
Okay. If you have to redo the ballot envelopes anyways, couldn't you, as Mr. Barker suggested, when you reordered the envelopes, like many other states do, just have a flap that covers the signatures and covers the driver's license?
Good, but a county contacted me and said they're currently paying 8 to 10 cents per envelope. If they go to a privacy flap envelope, it jumps up to 80 cents per envelope.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Mr. Pyfo before we bring Mr. Clay Barker up? All right. Thank you, sir. Representative Simmons, did you also have a question for Mr. Barker?
I sure did. Thank you. Okay, so I was pretty captivated by the part of your testimony where you talked about bills like this that have been taken down in court. Do you have any idea what it costs those states when they go through the court process? For similar bills, I mean.
No, Representative, I don't. It depends on how much litigation there is. Paying the lawyers are expensive.
Yeah, they are. I heard we were trying to save money.
I mean, sometimes it's just a clear, quick decision by the court. Sometimes it drags out and there's other collateral issues in the case. So I really couldn't estimate.
Well, we'll have to look that up. Also, one more question for Mr. Barker. Are you surprised that there are no proponents to this bill? I mean, this is your expertise, your expert area. Is this something you hear about all the time?
With respect, Representative, nothing the legislature does surprises me a lot. Sometimes there's a lot of proponents, sometimes there isn't, because people just assume it'll go through. I don't really look at that.
Wouldn't it be nice to be the supermajority? Thank you.
All right. So, Ms. Barker, I have a question. So the current registration database, ELVIS, the worst acronym in the history of acronyms, is being rebid right now. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and we asked for a one-year extension so whoever the new Secretary of State is can actually work the contract details.
So if, Mr. Pyfo raised the issue of enforcement and how he didn't have time to count to see how many per driver's license number got turned in. Would it be possible in the request for quote to just put that there needs to be a space in that database so when the clerk receives a mail-in ballot, they can enter the driver's license and then the whatever, son of Elvis, daughter of Elvis, Priscilla, whatever, that system just signals when an alert when that driver's license has been used more than 10 times so that the clerks don't have to count?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I believe that's something that can be designed into the new database. There's the minimum requirements from the federal and state government and anything else the state wants in there.
Okay. All right. And then on to your question about disability, I'm also going to ask our conferee here who's representing Disability Rights Center. Could we carve out an exemption for if you're turning in the ballot for somebody who's disabled according to the definition of whatever federal law and just enforce this for everybody else?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that would be one solution to it. And no one could bring a lawsuit unless a carrier took, say, 11 ballots. And then you'd have to say, okay, now you violated the law, and then the defense would be, but I was carrying it for a disabled person, it doesn't count. So it would take a while before you could get up to a legal challenge, but that would be one way around it. Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Representative Mosley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it the best use, this might be a question for Rick, but you've been around for a while, you seem seasoned. Is that the best use for the time of a county clerk to be having, like, is that the best use of their time to like now have to chase down, is this the 11th ballot when there is an election going on? And then once again, what do you think should happen to that 11th ballot? Does that person need to not have their vote be counted, or like what happens to that 11th ballot, that 12th ballot, the 13th ballot? The person who is handing their ballot to someone does not know that this person has turned in other ballots. This person's just trying to be helpful. So what do you think should happen to that ballot?
Representative, I'll answer your second question first. The ballots will count because the voter's done nothing wrong. This is a criminal statute that goes after the person who carries more than 10. But you can't invalidate a voter's vote. That's their constitutional right as long as they're a qualified elector and they do their part correctly. They don't know if someone carrying the ballot has already done more than 10. On the first question, with respect, Representative, I'm going to evade it. It's not our decision to decide how the county clerks should prioritize their time. That's what the legislature balances all the different interests and gives guidance on where the emphasis should be.
It seems like this bill is kind of prioritizing the county clerk's time. Would you say that the county clerk would have to set aside time to make this work?
Yes, Representative, but pretty much every election bill is telling the county clerks, they're the ones that actually run the elections, where to spend their time, what tasks they have to do. Then from that, they resource it, determine staffing and cost.
Thank you very much. It seems like the district attorneys are going to be very busy with all the things that's coming out of this committee. Thank you.
Representative Chauncey.
Just real quick, Clay, would there be a possibility on the envelopes where we could consider adding like a QR code to correlate with an ID so you could protect the privacy of the individual? I mean, it's very easy to print it on an envelope and scan that when they present that.
And Representative, I discussed this a little bit with Mr. Caskey, and the way the system would work through it is he would convene county clerks, we'd look at what the bill requires, talk to the requirements, come up with options of how to address it. That could be one. As was pointed out, that this bill, even though the word envelope is in the description, it's not actually in the bill. It could be on the envelope. It could be on like one of our forms. It's called AV5 for assistance. Could be inside it. We'd have to look through different options of what would be most cost effective. And different counties could take different routes as long as they satisfied the requirements of the bill.
All right. So I've got Representative Neighbor, I've got Representative Brunk, I've got the ranking minority member, and then Representative Simmons, and then we need to move on to the opponents after that. So Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this bill covering drop boxes and mail? I'm just not clear on that. Does it for delivering it to the mailbox or a drop box?
Representative, the way it's written is anyone who assists a voter in transmitting a ballot, and we've always assumed that doesn't apply to postal workers and election staff because they have no contact with the voter. That's just their job. But if you if my daughter took my ballot out to the mailbox, she would have to fill this out. If I took my wife's ballot to a drop box, I would have to fill it out. I always do, and I show it to the camera before I put it in. But it's anyone that helps the voter transmit the ballot, so you have that chain of custody is on there.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll have a comment later when it's appropriate. Thank you.
Representative Brunk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I know the answer, but twice in here, it talks about the number 10, that you can't deliver any more than that. I think it implies no more than a total of 10, but it doesn't necessarily say that. That's my assumption, but it doesn't say, it wouldn't preclude 10 at a time. It doesn't say that specifically one way or the other. I assume that we're talking about a total of 10 throughout the election cycle as opposed to 10 at a time. Is that correct?
Correct, Representative, 10 per election, primary, general, special.
So I just got that as an assumption from the language. I don't know if that needs to be.
And I'd like to clarify that that's already law. We passed that a couple of years ago. We've just had no way to enforce it since we passed the law.
Okay, thank you for that. That's helpful.
Yeah. All right. Representative Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Barker, you talked a little bit about, well, dare I say, I've been learning about something called the axis of ballot harvesting. And it sounds a little bit like perhaps former Governor Sam Brownback engaged in a little ballot harvesting. Can you elaborate perhaps on that part of your testimony? I looked for more detail in your written testimony and I didn't see much.
I was giving a little history of the policy. So ballot harvesting is now defined as an individual that carries more than 10 ballots, and that's now a crime. And back in 2010, I think both parties were realizing the importance of mail ballots and chasing in that extra 40% where the voter would get their ballot and just sit on it. And so both parties were doing it, and I believe at the time the Republicans thought the Democrats were way ahead of them, and we were being encouraged to catch up. And I think that created a more aggressive get-out-the-vote effort, and the legislature wanted to push back on that.
That's too bad. I think the goal is to get people to vote, but different philosophies, I suppose.
Okay. Mr. Ranking Minority Member.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Deputy Secretary, thank you for the testimony. And this is something that I would appreciate, don't have to deliver, but go back and talk to Mr. Caskey. In March 2017, the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights submitted a report to Kansas saying that the SAFE Act, actually, they had several concerns about that potentially the law violates civil rights. And I've been doing some research to see what the response has been, and I can't find it. So could you go back and with Mr. Caskey and just say, hey, give us an update on that. That would help out a lot, since we're talking about a similar bill, driver's license, on Thursday. Thank you.
I will,
Right.
Mr. Rankin.
Okay. So thank you to the conferees. I'm going to go ahead and move on to opponent testimony because we've got 4 opponents listed and we've only got a half hour left. I'll remind the conferees that, as with all the conferees today, please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Our first conferee is Ms. Ann Ma. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Committee, for allowing me my opponent testimony today. I am Ann Ma, a Granny activist and former ranking minority member of this committee. House Bill 2493 adds roadblocks to the return of ballots in elections and guarantees that more valid ballots will not be counted. It is pure voter suppression. I am a proud and unabashed ballot harvester. This committee has tried to make that term a dirty word, so let me clear the air. A ballot harvester is someone who wants to help neighbors make their votes count. For more than 20 years, I have been getting lists of folks who have mail-in ballots not returned and made sure they had a plan to get them returned. If by election day they were still outstanding, I offered to help them return their ballots. If they wanted help, I did. Have to say I'm still waiting on my check from George Soros for all of that. Evidently, it's a paid position. I must be doing it wrong. The addition of being a qualified elector is mystifying. The term isn't even defined, so if I am a qualified elector in Shawnee County but not the city, can I return the ballot of a friend who lives in the city? Now, the 16-year-olds is a good point. I don't use 16-year-olds anymore because the last time I did, she got in some dog poop on the way to the house, got it all over my car, and then she got sick and we had to stop at 37th and Topeka so she could throw the door open and throw up on the road. So caution on 16-year-olds. The addition of the driver's license or ID number is also baffling. There's no valid security reason for this. It's just a barrier. As has been mentioned, who wants their driver's license number on the outside of an envelope? And what makes you think we only pick them up in one county? But we all know what this is about, pure partisan politics. It's well documented that Democrats use mail-in ballots more than Republicans, actually to about 2 to 1. If you can reduce the number of mail-in ballots, you discount Democratic votes disproportionately. That's called if you can't win, cheat. There are so many close races that if this bill became law, it could certainly swing more than a few elections. But let me say, if anyone thinks it was bad that women stole the vote in 2022, hold my beer, because you ain't seen nothing yet. We will overcome any obstacle put in our way to try to suppress the vote. With that, I'd stand for questions at the appropriate time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next conferee is Logan Damon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Logan Demond, and I'm the Director of Policy and Research at the ACLU of Kansas. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization with more than 35,000 supporters across the state. We work to ensure, to protect, and to strengthen the civil rights and liberties of all Kansans. I'm here today because we strongly oppose House Bill 2493, which imposes 2 new burdensome restrictions on the return of advance ballots, as we have just heard. I'll just highlight some of our major concerns here. First, I'd like to discuss the addition of these unnecessary barriers. I've said it before in our written testimony, I'll say it again today. The Kansas Legislature should be focused on making it easier for eligible citizens to vote. This bill does the exact opposite. Elderly voters, voters with disabilities, voters who lack reliable transportation, voters who work long and flexible hours, rural voters often rely on trusted individuals to return their advance ballot. Their choices that they make on that ballot do not reflect the individual who is returning that ballot for them. So why must that person be a qualified elector? House Bill 2493 does not correct a deficiency in current law, but it compounds an existing problem by further constraining who can help. By layering these new eligibility and identification requirements on top of the existing limit, this bill only deepens the barriers to ballot access and increases the likelihood that eligible voters will be unable to return their ballots in time and that they will be counted. I'd like to talk about the obvious privacy concerns, which we've heard today already a little bit about. The bill does not explain how one's driver's license would be protected, how long it would be retained, who would have access to it, why this information is even necessary, or how it would be used. Doing so increases the risk of identity theft, misuse, unauthorized access, given the number of hands this will pass throughout the process. Finally, I'd like to discuss the risk of disenfranchisement here. One of our primary concerns is that these requirements will simply deter people from assisting voters altogether. Confusing rules, fear of making a technical mistake, or concerns about privacy will discourage participation, and it will lead to several ballots going unreturned. This bill risks casting doubt on anyone attempting to assist an eligible voter with returning their ballot, and it puts election workers in a really bad position, especially volunteer election workers. So in conclusion, I would just like to remind this committee that the right to vote includes the practical ability to cast a ballot. This bill undermines that right. I encourage each of you to reject House Bill 2493. I thank you for your time, and I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time.
All right, thank you. Our next conferee is Melissa Stieler. Styler, I apologize.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all again. Believe it or not, I'm not representing the axis of ballot harvesting today. I'm just here with Loud Light Civic Action. I know that's a shocker to some of you. But actually, a lot of the fellow conferees touched on a lot of what's in my written testimony. So I wanted to opine a little bit because I've also been brushing up on my constitutional law. I actually spent this morning in district court on the hearing on SB 4, which of course was passed not that long ago, and abolishing the 3-day grace period. And I'm not going to comment on ongoing litigation. I don't think that that's wise, of course, but something that Brad Schlossman said, who's the private attorney that was contracted by the Attorney General's office to represent the state, he said something in his argument that really grounded me in the purpose of this work that we try to do together. He said, political rhetoric doesn't matter from a constitutional perspective. And it really hit this point that I've been trying to bring into my testimony for a number of years now, is that whenever it comes to changing laws around our elections, around our democracy, around the institution that maintains the freedoms that we all appreciate so much, it's supposed to place this safeguard around our freedom to vote. And in this circumstance, whenever we're looking at laws, it's important to remember that facts and evidence matter a lot more than feelings and rhetoric. While there may be a state interest in creating an enforcement mechanism for existing law or for helping support the confidence of in elections that Kansans have, the interest does not ever supersede the freedom for all eligible voters to cast their ballot freely, safely, and equally. As stated by a Bush-appointed judge in her 2018 opinion on the Fish case regarding Deepak, which I will send to you all to review before Thursday's hearing, give you more than 24 hours notice. But if Kansans who try to register to vote cannot be sure that they are in fact registered, particularly after they have been led to believe that they complied with all federal registration laws, it erodes the confidence in the electoral system. If Kansans receive misinformation from state officials about whether they are registered to vote, it erodes confidence in the electoral system. If eligible Kansans' votes are not counted despite believing that they are registered to vote, it erodes confidence in the electoral system. Now, I know that this quote is about voter registration, but I think that it applies very clearly to a lot of the work that you all do here together. Whether that is the neighbor who's helping out her fellow citizens in casting their ballot and is unknowingly committing a crime because there was no education that was put forth about criminalizing ballot harvesting, which Loud Light's never engaged in, any kind of ballot collection practice, though apparently Brownback has, which is a fun fact I learned today. But now it's illegal, so either way. Whether it's putting the burden of election security back onto the citizens in which it is your duty to protect and defend.
Please wrap up your comments. You're well over 3 minutes.
It is your responsibility to create election security laws that is not a burden on our citizens, that does not restrict their own freedoms, because that is something that is going to hurt our confidence in elections. We have to look at the impact that these laws have on voters and decide whether there is a real state interest in having that law passed. And in conclusion, we of course encourage you all to vote no on this, but we also further encourage the committee to do their due diligence in ensuring that any changes to our electoral laws have been fully vetted with evidence-based conclusions for recommendations rather than based on people's feelings. If legislative body engages in this kind of vetting process during the committee process instead of rushing things through, then hopefully cleanup bills such as this won't have to waste our time as often as they do. So I'm happy to stand for questions.
Okay, our final conferee that I have listed is Mr. Mike Burgess. Welcome back to the committee, sir.
All righty, well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And as he said, I'm Mike Burgess, and I'm the Director of Policy and Outreach at the Disability Rights Center of Kansas. And since apparently the conferees were supposed to say if we previously chaired this committee, I have to say that a long, long time ago, I had the honor and privilege of chairing the Elections Committee. So I will not belabor things that have been already stated. A lot of the conferees, especially some of the neutral, covered a lot of the things. So I think one of the things, historically we've tried to encourage civic engagement. One piece, I think we allow individuals who are 16 and older to serve on an election board. This would make it so they couldn't assist a friend, family member, others, or a person with a disability to be able to cast and complete or deliver their ballot. And so I think that's a negative strike on here. I think more of on a philosophical piece. Kind of one other thing I want to elaborate, and I think, Mr. Chair, your question that you're going to ask, I think that would be, that would certainly be one way, or there might be a way to do that with the carve-out that would address those concerns. Because even back in 2021, I advocated in testimony and before the committee that, it ought to be that individual's right to choose who assists them. I mean, that's kind of a core tenet of disability rights philosophy. And so we very much support that and would appreciate that opportunity to have that discussion. My head wasn't wrapped around that as I was, quickly trying to get testimony in amidst all the other things going on in the building this time of year. But just to kind of talk about what it's like for people with disabilities, because I think that's one of the things that some of us struggle with, and I know I did. I didn't know what I didn't know. But people with disabilities, they deal with challenges and struggles every day. And they typically require help to get through their day and through their week and through their month. And so as they're doing that, they've got a limited support network. And so in their mind, they're weighing every time they ask somebody for help, what they, okay, is this, do I need them to take me to the grocery store? I don't want to ask them to do this other thing because I don't want to be a burden beyond that. And so that's always the calculus people with disabilities are doing all the time. And so I think with this example, asking somebody for their driver's license number to help either run something to the mailbox or, if you need help and you have a disability that, inserting the ballot into the envelope and sealing and going through everything, I mean, that changes the nature of that relationship, and I think about, the fact that you may be over visiting a neighbor and, oh, hey, can you help me do this and run this out to the mailbox? Well, I may not have my wallet on me. I don't have my driver's license number memorized, even though maybe I should. I don't write that many checks anymore, thankfully. But it makes that relationship more like going to the county treasurer than a neighbor, helping a neighbor. And so I think just keep that in mind as you're debating policy going forward, that this is the calculus that people with disabilities do every day as they try and get through it. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
All right, thank you. Appreciate your testimony. So we're going to start opponent questions. Who's your question for, Representative Mosley? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Burgess. You said that you were previously a chair of this committee?
Yes.
How?
I did something out of order. I apologize. I'll let you answer your question in just a moment. Is there anybody else wishing to speak as an opponent on this bill? Okay, seeing none now, please ask your question, Representative Mosley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, again, and thank you, Mr. Burgess. You said that you were previously a chair of this committee. How often would you put in a bill that didn't have any proponents? Like, do you have any experience doing that? That was a well thought out bill that didn't have any proponents. Do you have any experience in that?
So
it's a yes or no question.
we once had one with written-only proponents.
So no, you haven't.
And keep in mind, that was a long time ago, so I don't remember every hearing in every committee, so I apologize, but I'll say.
To your memory, have you done that?
I have seen it happen, but I don't recall.
Your non-answer is an answer. Thank you.
All right, are there any questions for Mr. Burgess? So, Representative Chauncey.
Just really quick, I guess. Could you give me some examples of where this threshold of 10 is? I mean, can you give me an example where someone would be necessary for someone to carry the 10 ballots? I mean, do we all live in neighborhoods where we have 10 disabled people that need us to carry a ballot to a mailbox? Or I just need an example for clarification for me where we'd need to carry 10 or more ballots.
So there are a number of situations, including assisted living centers. You may, a lot of times, individuals may have what are called personal care attendants or personal care workers that come into their home. A lot of those workers help multiple people. And so there are a number of situations. I mean, 10 was much better than 5. I mean, we had a lot of ongoing discussion back then with the chair at the time. And so at the last minute, it kind of ended up at 10, which made it, I think, less common where that would become an issue. But it's still, even at 10, that could pose an issue. And we just, we'd hate to see anybody disenfranchised, especially an individual with disabilities.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Burgess? So I think I heard you say, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, I think I heard you say that a carve-out that would take into account this federal law saying that a person with defined disability per federal statute could pick whoever the heck they wanted to turn in their ballot. Would that alleviate some of the concerns of the Center for Disability Rights?
That would certainly help. I will ultimately defer to attorneys because I'm a former legislator and a policy guy, not an attorney. So I'm not, that would certainly help address, or at least partially address some of the concerns that have come up.
Okay, thank you. All right, are there any other questions for Mr. Burgess? Okay, I'd like to ask Ms. Ann Ma to come back up. So you made a couple of comments, and I'd like to ask you to explain each of those. The first one is you said that ballots would not be counted. And I heard two neutral conferees both say that the ballot would be counted. The prosecution would be of the person that violated the 10 ballot rule. So what ballots would not be counted by this law?
The ones that don't get picked up because there's nobody to go get them, because this bill discourages people from helping their neighbors. So if my neighbor wants me to do it and I'm going, you know, I could get convicted here if we get this thing filled out wrong or it goes south. So those are the ballots I'm talking about.
Okay, so what is the situation where somebody gets called by their neighbor and asked to turn in a ballot and they couldn't go over and turn it in? The current law says you can turn in up to 10 ballots that are not your own.
Right. Well, there are a lot of things besides folks who are disabled that create a situation where you might need help. Like I said, I get a list, okay, of everybody. I'm a precinct committee person, so I check my precinct and I see who hasn't turned in their ballots. And I call them a week ahead and go, do you have a plan to get this in? Tell me your plan. Now, the day before, the day of in particular, of Election Day, if they haven't turned them in, I call them. The last time, one was a disabled gentleman who lived out in the county. Another was a young mom with 3 kids who wasn't about to go down and load those kids in the car, go down and drop her ballot off. And it was too late to mail it. Sometimes I even go around on Sunday and I put a note on the door that says, it's too late to mail your ballot. You know, you can't trust the post office now. You don't know how long it's going to take. If you still have that ballot and you need help getting it in, you can't get it in yourself, call me. And a number of neighbors do. An elderly lady who didn't drive so well, didn't want to get out and do it, a lot of times it is the elderly.
Okay, and then you also made the comment that a qualified Kansas elector is not defined in this bill. I did a little bit of work on this last year when we were doing the constitutional amendment. Isn't it the fact that qualified elector is defined in the Kansas Constitution?
There is that definition, but I checked also throughout the statutes, and qualified electors used in a lot of different ways. Like sometimes you have to be a qualified elector of the drainage district. You know, so a qualified elector might mean, like, am I picking up a ballot that I'm not qualified to vote on?
So if the bill says a qualified Kansas elector, wouldn't it follow that you are a qualified elector who lives in the state of Kansas or is otherwise authorized to vote in the state of Kansas? Isn't that pretty clearly defined?
Not really. I think that would be an assumption. You might want to clarify that. But again, then you're reducing greatly the pool of people who are available to go help their neighbors get their ballots in, and then we're right back to your first question. More ballots don't get counted.
Okay, are there any other questions for Ms. Ma? Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Ma, I'm very puzzled by your testimony. It seems like you're arguing something that the ship has already sailed. If under current law, it says a sworn statement. If you're going to pick up a ballot, a sworn statement is required from the person transmitting or delivering that they have not exercised undue influence or they've transmitted or delivered more than 10 ballots. It is already in current law. Further, the person, the voter, has to affirm, which also that they've authorized such a person to transmit or deliver the voter's ballot, and that you've also not exercised undue influence on the voting decision of the voter. I can't see the addition of, oh, by the way, I'm going to put my driver's license on here is much of a change at all.
Well, it is if you don't have one.
And how many people don't have one? You have one, correct?
I checked, oh gosh, that's in my testimony for Thursday. I'll tell you the exact number. But there is a great number of people who don't have a driver's license. It's people who have them suspended. People who just drive without them because they can't afford them. There are a lot of people who don't have driver's licenses. I mean, all of us in here, you know, middle-class, privileged people, it's no big deal for us to go down and get a driver's license, but for the homeless people, they don't have driver's license. A lot of people don't have driver's license.
So if I may, follow-up question. So, I mean, the current system, you seem to be concerned about truth-telling, but the current system requires a positive affirmation by the person, such as yourself, who would be delivering a ballot that you haven't unduly tried to influence, you know, and that the person themselves affirms a similar situation. I mean, don't you think that that is I mean, is it not the case that your complaint actually is against a prior law that is already passed and is already on the books, that what we're requesting here is just a method to enforce, thank you, Mr. to enforce current law?
Well, I think we'd be guessing what the purpose is since there were no proponents. I'm guessing it was, to reduce the number of people who get to turn them in. If you're asking, that what I sign now, when I pick these up, say, no undue influence, that's right. My problem today is these two additional barriers are going to reduce the number of people who are going to be willing to go help their neighbors get their ballots in. And these are real barriers. Both the qualified elector and the driver's license reduces the pool of people available.
So what is, so you seem to have a big problem with this qualified elector. What is too young to turn in a ballot? Should I be able to give a ballot to a 3-year-old and let him toddle out to the drive and put it in the mailbox? I mean, what is there no qualification that should be required for somebody to turn in somebody else's ballot to help them exercise the most solemn right, the right to vote? Is it anybody just be able to do that?
I haven't really given that a lot of thought, and we joke about 16-year-olds, but there are a lot of high school kids who really love to get out and help us do this, and so they would be excluded for one. Somebody mentioned a person who may be a caregiver who's not a U.S. citizen. I remember, Mike will know, we one time had one of our research people was a Canadian citizen right here on the committee, had never become a U.S. citizen, and he was a research assistant. He wouldn't be able to take my ballot in.
Should he be able to vote?
Only if he's an American citizen.
Do you think that they should have the right to vote?
Who?
A non-citizen?
It's not what I said.
No, I understand that's not what you said. I'm asking a question.
Well, oh, you're talking about that big,
Okay.
okay.
I'm going to ask for decorum in the room. I asked you a question.
Right.
Should you think a non-citizen should be able to vote?
No, I said they should be able to take a ballot in.
That's my question,
Okay.
is if they're not allowed to vote, why should they be able to help somebody else exercise the right to vote?
Wow, that's a crazy question there, because I'm totally not getting why you would ask that. Why wouldn't a non-citizen who maybe is preparing to be a citizen want to help us with the franchise?
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, Representative Simmons, Representative Mosley, and then Representative Chauncey.
Hi, thank you for being here. For those that don't know, and also once represented the great 58th District. Oh, well, different numbers, my district. So when you were the ranking minority on the House Elections Committee, do you recall any bills where you had 0 proponents?
We're talking about 15 years ago, so I'm not sure. It would have been weird, though. And, don't know if now Secretary Schwab would have allowed that or not. Just don't remember.
Well, thanks for being here.
Okay, Representative Mosley.
My question is actually for Mr. Burgess, so I can wait, or he can come back up.
Okay, are there any other questions for Ms. Ma, Representative Chauncey?
Yeah, just real quick on that. You said you follow up on ballots that were mailed out for people to harbor. Is there any percentage of those people, do they call you to come pick them up, or you reach out to them to say, hey, can we come pick your ballot up because we haven't received it yet?
Well, in my precinct, people often know I'm available to do that. I've been precinct committee woman now for 25 years. But as a precinct committee person, I think that's my job. So I check my precinct and see who doesn't have their ballots in yet, and I contact them.
So just a question on that, Mr. Chairman. So if someone receives a ballot, decides, hey, I don't want to vote, so you follow up on that. If they want you to come pick it, shouldn't it make more sense to you that if they want you to come pick up their ballot and carry their ballot, wouldn't they give you the call to say, hey, I want to cast my ballot? Because I would feel that you're reaching out to try to make sure that they actually cast a ballot and maybe they don't want to vote.
Well, you would think if somebody went to the trouble to request a ballot at home, they probably want to vote. So getting a call to say if you want to is okay. If they say, here's what happens more often. They have the ballot at home. They go, I've changed my mind. I'm going to go in and vote. And I go, great.
One last thing, real quick. So if I get a mail-in ballot, I request for it because I think I want to vote, and then all of a sudden I decide that I don't want to vote for Harris or Trump, so I'm not going to vote. so they don't want to submit that vote, so you just follow up to make sure that they still want to vote?
I just ask them if they have a plan to vote, and if they go, I'm not going to vote, then I go, okay.
All right, thank you.
All right, are there any other questions for Ms. Ma? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask Mr. Demond to come up. I believe the ranking minority member has a question for you.
I've been waiting a long time to ask you a question, Logan. It used to be with the Kansas House Dems. I will not ask you who was your favorite, but let me ask you this. You're one of the probably the most, you are a bright, promising advocate for voter rights, and it's been a pleasure just to be associated with you. With that said, in your new role in ACLU, what recommendation have you seen, if we haven't really identified a problem with this, what recommendation have you seen would help govern and create policy so we can increase voter participation and engagement? What would you recommend from ACLU?
Mr. Chair, if I may, thank you for the question, Mr. Ranking Minority Member. You know, I'm happy you asked this because this is one of our 2 ongoing priorities. We're focused on voting rights at the American Civil Liberties Union here in Kansas. We support several proposals. Some of those improving voter education, expanding the number of secure ballot drop boxes, accessibility is a big thing, especially with relation to this, strengthening election administration and actually addressing problems that do exist, protecting privacy, ensuring eligible voters can participate in any number of ways. We do not believe that this legislation addresses any real problem. This is instead creating additional barriers.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Demond? All right, Representative Mosley, you still have a question for Mr. Burgess?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to understand, well, not understand. I understand the motivations, but my question is, it was brought up that someone with a defined disability, does everyone who has a disability have something that's been diagnosed by a doctor for disability?
The ADA definition is fairly broad.
It's very broad.
As was stated before, so.
If you're really worried about these carve outs and you have like your 13th or 14th or 15th ballot that you're picking up, how would you be able to verify if that person was disabled so that you won't get in trouble under this bill? The changes were made.
I mean, I'd have to think about this and probably ultimately discuss it with some of our legal experts as well. But I mean, potentially an affidavit is what's used in other situations.
And if someone has to, would you potentially, if someone has to sign an affidavit saying that they have a disability, would that be potentially violating their HIPAA rights to say that you don't have to disclose disability?
Depending upon how the language is, yes and no. I mean, you can disclose that you have a disability without disclosing what the disability is. So there's nuance there that's important. And I know, like, even going back, we worked with the Secretary of State's office and clerks. There was a discrepancy with the language going back, gosh, probably almost 10 years now, where we ended up working and fixing the language to make sure that somebody didn't have to perjure themselves just to get assistance to vote.
Okay.
So the language does matter, and we would need a good process with what that is, but it can be possible, but I don't know. I mean, we'd have to look. And I'd get people far smarter than I.
So you have to pay for lawyers potentially, take some hours, stuff like that. So I want to say thank you very much for your answers. I think that there is a concern for undue influence, and I don't think it's from the people collecting ballots. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, committee, we're past time. I'm going to close the hearing on House Bill 2493. Thank you, all the conferees, for your testimony. I'd like to highlight for the committee before we adjourn that there is a reception at the Ramada tonight of county clerks, the Association for the County Clerks and Election Officers. I encourage everybody to go over there and meet your clerks and meet the clerks and talk to them about these issues. If there's nothing else for the good of the order, we're adjourned.